Thanks for taking the time to download and listen to this podcast from CelticUnderground.net. I'm Harry Brady, and this is Andrew H. Smith. I once did this with someone, and the first thing I said was, "So, did you get to watch it?" No, actually.
No. You're okay. You know, actually, it was a really bizarre thing, but I not only watched it, but I watched it again on the Saturday night. It's a long time since I've done that. You know, when you've got a live game, we used to have them in videotapes, like 30 years ago, but you could actually, you could go on a iPlayer. Because I actually remember in the 1990 Cup final, so it was so bizarre. I'd taped it and we'd come back home for the game. For some reason, me and my friend decided to spend, we were really ahead of the game, but we decided to try and rate every player by how many touches they'd had and all that, which people weren't doing in 1990. But it was really weird on Saturday night sitting thinking, I'm going to watch this again. And see if you watch from the second half of the extra time and right through the penalties, it's just a great watch. It was just a genuinely great watch. It was barnstorming. It was the kind of game that, when we're talking about 1990, and that was a terrible game, of course, but these games that really did live long in the memory. And I think, in terms of the kind of Scottish football firmament, that will be one of those games people will talk about, you know, in the kind of hallowed kind of tones. Because just the sheer kind of undulations.
Your point about watching it and taping it, and you would watch it over and over and over again, to the point where I'm not sure if my memory of like the 86 and the 88 and the 89 Cup finals are memories of me being there, which I was, or if my memories are now memories of watching it, like, so, you know, 85 Cup final and 86 and all around that time, whether my memories are now like Arch McPherson's commentary seared into my brain, or
are they second hand memory? But it's a bit, isn't life and isn't your whole memory banks a bit like that? Do you remember something, or do you remember your mum and dad telling you how it was, and then you create that picture in your own mind of some of your earliest memories? Because I almost think to myself that I don't have any memories before my first communion, and I can genuinely remember Celtic played Hibs in a cup final that day, just bizarrely. But, you know, and so your memories, are they received memories, or are they genuine memories? And a lot of it's that kind of curious mix, and that'll be the curious mix of kind of seeing it as it happened and then going over it again, because it was just so pulsating.
Well, my nephew really at the end of the game turns to me and says, "What's your Apple Watch saying about your heart rate?" And I said, "Oh, I'll check it when I get home."
Yeah.
And when I got home, so my heart rate was, so anybody any medic listening to this, if you can tweet me if I've got a problem here when I'm about to describe what my heart rate did. So funny you mentioned the second half. The majority of the second half, my heart rate was my resting heart rate. It was 46, 48. It was just below 50, which, you know, by all accounts is a good rate. And from roughly the time of Liam Scales and Greg Taylor's second debacle, through to the end of penalties, it was 120. Was my heart rate, so that just shows you the difference. It was so your point about the second half being a great second half and pulsating and stuff like that.
Second half of extra time, yeah. So like it was just because it was, and even watching it again, even though you know what's going to happen, I suppose it's like great films. It still grips you. It still succeeded in gripping you, even though you know where it's going. But that's just because the genuine kind of drama of it, you know.
So if we wind all the way back and get to the start of the game, pretty good start from. So I too went back on iPlayer, although, and to watch the whole game, although I didn't watch it all in its entirety. I went to chunks, and the first thing that I wanted to get back to was the first Aberdeen goal, because it was one of these ones where it didn't feel like there was danger, and then all of a sudden they were through and scored. And so I wanted to look back at because I wasn't paying massive attention, that my perception as to what went wrong for Celtic is what went wrong. So what was your thoughts on the first goal?
Maybe I can't shake off the old ways of being an impartial journalist. But my thoughts of the first goal was it was a great through ball, and it was a great finish. You know, it was a great take and it was a great finish. I don't know how much blame I would apportion to Celtic's back four. Of course, the line was so flat throughout. You were seeing the problems with that, and I don't know where that was coming from in terms of. And you did see a lot of the time that Scales and Carter Vickers, the communication seemed very kind of off, in the sense of they were too close, or they were too far away. They didn't seem to have their angles right. So there was an element of that in the first goal, as I remember it. But I'm sure you're going to tell us, what did you actually?
No, it's just my gut feel was that it wasn't necessarily them, because it was a great through ball. My gut feel was we'd started the game a bit lazy.
Yeah. Well,
and a bit slow. And then when I watched it back, Callum McGregor sort of jogs after the guy, who I can't remember who it was who played. They take a throw in, and I think it was, but anyway, the ball comes in the touchline, and Callum McGregor just sort of jogs after the guy who plays the through ball. And at the game, I think and I'm not saying Tomoki Iwata is the greatest defensive midfielder, but at the game, my gut feel was if he had started instead of Callum, that we wouldn't have lost that first goal. And then when I watched it again, it sort of reinforced my opinion that our midfield just seemed a bit not quite switched on. We're jogging after the ball at that point.
It's almost...
So like you, then it moves to, I think it's a great through ball.
Yeah. And, we can talk about, I know a lot of people just have an aversion, a lot of Celtic supporters almost have an aversion these days, which is kind of strange when you think about the past days, but signing players from other teams in Scotland. But to me, there's a player I would sign. I think...
Majowski?
Yeah, I think the value you would get from Majowski. And I don't think it's close. He's 24. You've got Shankland at 30. I think Majowski's got everything Shankland's got, and a whole lot more. This is a guy who's...
Well, he's not got that caravan that Majowski, that Shankland was
exactly.
So I don't think he's got that.
Yeah. Like, I mean, the guy's scoring for his international team. I watched all the Aberdeen games in Europe, in their Europa, your Conference League section, and he scored goals against good teams. So he's a guy who scored. He scores against Celtic and Rangers here. So he's a guy who scores goals when the opposition is better and his chances are limited. Mm-hmm. And he's a guy who scored goals against all the teams in Scotland. Well, I know there's always a kind of temptation to say, is he really what's going to get us making an impact in the Champions League? But, well, maybe you need a £35 million player to guarantee you making an impact in the Champions League. And none of those guys are coming to Celtic in the summer. So you have to sign someone who perhaps can give you that. Look at Kyogo this season. You know, he scored goals, great goals in the Champions League against good sides. You know,
I mean, on the Majowski thing in the transfer window just passed, I was probably of the mindset, with the money we had in the bank, if we could pick him up for circa £4 million, he would have been worth it, because he would have been not a first choice striker probably, but would have been capable of scoring 6-7 goals in the run in. But also we would have taken him out of the Aberdeen team who we were going to play, and we also ended up playing just now in that cup semi-final. So for me there was a double element of, we take him out of Aberdeen, who we were about to play at the end of the transfer window, and he's a player. I suppose the counter argument to that might be, well, he wouldn't have been first choice because Kyogo would have been first choice. And again, I'm not saying Adam Eder is the answer, but I suppose the counter to that would be, would he have scored any more goals than Adam Eder scored?
Well, you've got to remember, Adam for a couple of games, he became first choice. And it kind of, that experiment ended with the Tynecastle, with what happened at Tynecastle. You're not putting all the blame on him, but that whole missed penalty changed the entire complexion of that game. And he couldn't quite make.
But equally, he won us the game at Easter Road by scoring the penalty.
Yeah, but I just mean
he scored the third goal at Ibrox.
Yeah, just the way things have worked out for Kyogo this season. But I genuinely, and he had that kind of falter kind of round about the kind of January time, where you could tell Brendan Rodgers was thinking, is he really giving me what I want? I genuinely think Miovski could have come in then, and I know he had a really fallow period for Aberdeen, but I think you can put that down to that idiotic Brexit gammon of a manager that Aberdeen flirted with for almost too long. But I think Miovski could have come in.
I can never work out. See, what is that his real hairpiece, or has he got a wig?
Well, I think that's...
It looks like a wig, and he's got no eyebrows. It makes you think, but other times I think it's a real hairpiece.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it that. No, I think
you must have seen it up
close. That's his real hair. That's his real hair. Yeah, that's his real hair.
Right. I couldn't put my finger on.
Yeah. No, because I'm quite obsessed. As you might well imagine, I'm quite obsessed by hair. I was quite obsessed with Brendan's hair on Saturday because the widow's peak was much more evident than you often see it. Because it's combed. I used to watch Big X, Alex in press conferences and all that, because he had a brilliant barber. Just the way that it was kind of coiffured to cover any kind of thinning. I've got no choice. Those days are long gone. But I think Miovski could have come in and actually become, because he would have had, because if Brendan Rodgers had assigned him then, he would have given him a choice to prove himself as number one. And I think he could have done it. He could have been a genuine challenge to Kyogo for the last 5 months of the season. I mean, he's been a partial challenger, partial support player who has pushed O into the kind of the.
Oh, he's
gone. If you think about it, just before scoring a few goals, but he would never. I think he's he played once in the last maybe 3 or 4 months. It's a couple of brief cameos.
The last time I saw O in the team,
but really nothing.
What it looked like to me with Ida, what sort of happened is, I thought for a period of time, what Ida's insertion into the team, it just seemed to make the way that Brendan wanted the team to play click a bit better, and it was almost as if once they were playing that way, Brendan was able to say, right, so you've just not been getting it. That's how I want it. And then he's taken Ida back out and Kyogo back in, and we've continued playing that way. It was almost as if we just needed.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. But it was the drive. Ida had come in with drive. He had that real drive, and he's got a terrific touch. The guy, I think he's a much better player than when you think about the the wailing and gnashing that accompanies his arrival. He could have a big part to play in a really successful. He should have actually he should have killed all the drama. He should have killed all the drama on Saturday by scoring that chance. Oh my word, that was a poor miss.
Yeah, we'll get there. But I was going to say, one of the things about Ida, I remember saying, well, a guy who's not getting a regular game for Norwich is hardly going to be our saviour. My only hope was, I look back, and he'd come into the Norwich team, played decently, reading the stuff. Then he got an injury, and then it wasn't great. But still, 50% of his career first team goals had actually been this season, prior to him coming to Celtic. Subsequently, he scored another 7. So it's something like 2/3 of his entire career. He only turned 23 in February, and 2/3 of his career goals have been this season. So there is an element of, as I say, I'm not saying he's the solution and the saviour, but there is an element of, well, he was a younger player who for a season was out, and maybe he's just evolving. You know, maybe that missed season is just taking him a wee bit longer to get to where he was going to be, and he's going to be a half decent player for. And I'm not sure that we will sign him.
There's not necessarily going to be that option, because I think Norwich have kind of thought to themselves, well, wait a minute, maybe we should have given him the kind of confidence that certainly Brendan Rodgers, I think, did give him that kind of injection, that kind of boost. He's talked about that. Like, and this is what he needs. He needs somebody to believe in. Look, I know people don't like to hear that, but sometimes that's huge for footballers. The psychology, and the kind of faith. We all know it, like line managers or whatever, how it feels, how different you feel when somebody's really giving you that support. And they really do have confidence with them.
And sometimes we forget that they're just young lads. I mean, 22, 23, 24. The person I was at that age was a very different person to who you are, definitely. Even 10 years later.
Definitely. Like, so, no, like, you can't fault his contribution. You cannot fault his contribution, but whether or not, as you say, because they thought they could let him go, Norwich, because they brought in Sidney van Hooijdonk, who's achieved very little. He's made very little impression. And let's be honest about it, if Celtic had signed Sidney van Hooijdonk instead of Ida, at the time, let's be honest about it, supporters would probably have been happier. Because of the whole kind of...
the name and his connection, yeah.
Yeah. And then again, maybe Sidney van Hooijdonk, with all that, it might have been, for him, it might have been the fill-up that he needed to show himself. Who knows? Who knows with how these sliding doors moments, like, can work out.
So if we get back to the game, Aberdeen 1 up. I was still pretty relaxed at that point because my attitude was that that's far too early for Aberdeen. Cannot go on the big pitch of Hampden and play for another, well, with modern injury time, another 90 to 95 minutes.
Yep.
And hold out for us not to score a goal. That was my attitude. But I did think they had a very simplistic tactic which was working for them, which was Duke on Taylor, Majowski on Scales, and just play the ball up to those two, and our two couldn't cope with their physicality in the first half. That was what it looked like to me. What were your thoughts?
No, that was like also, I kept watching it thinking, this Aberdeen team shouldn't have been the bottom six. They're such a weird team because they're actually one of the more talented in terms of their playing personnel. They're one of the more talented Aberdeen teams of recent times. Not that you would know it from their league position and some of the performances they turn in. But my boy's only 14, but he said to me on Friday, he said, Dad, I'm really worried about tomorrow because he said Aberdeen will turn up. And you could just tell that they would turn up. And when they're capable of turning up, I watched them like in Eintracht Frankfurt and such and again, they didn't always get the results they needed in those games, but they certainly put their opposition, they certainly posed problems. So you kind of thought they would provide a show, and Celtic at that point weren't in their rhythm, struggled to get in their rhythm, and they were fortunate enough with the mistake that really got them the equaliser. It was what they needed. It's what they needed to kind of flick the switch for them. And I have to say, Celtic for the first half of the second period were completely dominant. Completely dominant. They really should have the game won in that period.
That's when my heart rate was sitting.
That's what I mean. I can understand why your rate. I have to say, I don't know what your heart rate was doing. Can you, no, maybe I'm jumping the gun here, but when Hart stepped up to take the penalty, or when the Aberdeen that went. I'll tell you, for me, sorry if I'm jumping ahead, but for me, in those two penalties, I thought Iwata and Johnson deserved enormous credit because their penalties were exceptional under those circumstances. Exceptional penalties.
Well, as you say, we'll get on to the penalties on. No, it's all right. On our goal, on our equaliser, I'm in the south stand, but in the sort of corner towards the Celtic end. So you are quite far away from it. My initial feel is referee's bound to give a foul because Kyogo goes in and an Aberdeen player who falls down. So you're just expecting that VAR will give a foul. And then I didn't know what Kyogo was playing at. If you compare, I'm not saying that Majowski's some brilliant player, but if you compare Majowski's through ball and being clean through on goal and how he went with pace and hit it, and Kyogo seemed to be stumbling over the ball to allow the Aberdeen players to come in, so he doesn't do anything. And then Kuhn comes in, and only because of the way that he so slowly and calmly slotted it in, I thought, well, I can't really tell from here. Must be pretty much an open goal that he's slotting this into. And actually, it wasn't as much of an open goal as I felt it must be by the way that he was taking it. But
no. I see where you're coming from entirely. I mean, it was a really composed finish, and he's shown in flashes after when you think about Aberdeen, you think about his first game. Really, I know he scored the goal and all that, but he had these challenges to start with. But I think he's a guy who could really a full pre-season under his belt, really feeling secure. I think you could see something really quite encouraging for Kuhn next year. I think in terms of his contribution, I think he will have a real part to play.
He's got quick feet, and he can put a cross in. And he just needs to have more confidence in his ability to go past people and
that's what surprised me. He came with his reputation and blistering pace. We haven't seen it often. We haven't seen him kind of stand up a defender and really breeze past him, which was people moaned about some of the write-ups he received. It was like, no, his final ball's not always there, but the one thing you can say, he can take a man on and beat a man, but we haven't seen an awful lot of that.
No, so but like you say,
I think we haven't seen all of his kind of armoury.
I think coming in and appreciate again, relatively young guy. He's coming to a different country. The team's already playing. I think a pre-season, feel settled in. Time to really judge him is there. One player who gets criticism sometimes, I think unfairly, is Matt O'Reilly. And when the ball broke to Matt O'Reilly again from where everything all the Celtic goals were at the other end to me, and when the ball broke to Matt O'Reilly, I just thought, just put your laces through this. And as soon as he hits it, and I can see that he's got elevation in it, I'm thinking, this is going to go for the bar. But it was pretty cool because it's right in the top corner. I mean, it's a great finish.
Oh, yeah, he's touched to set himself up. There's a kind of a man like surging with kind of confidence, like the way he set that, and just angled it, as you say, into the top corner. That was sheer class. Sometimes I do think he does drop out of games.
Yeah. In
a way that and I like. Sometimes I feel as if he's playing on the fringes more than he needs to.
Mm-hmm.
I felt it against Rangers a couple of times. And you think you really want him to step up because you know how, he's a calibre performer. So you want to see him being destructive, not just scoring a goal, but being destructive. If you remember, he had a period last season where, and even when you think about the goals we talked about at Europe, Furuhashi, in terms of the provider, threading balls through or whatever, we see it like as the kind of technician. See the technician side of it with his finishing, but the technician side of it with his craftsmanship in terms of creating. I think that seems to have kind of dipped a little bit in the second half of the season.
Maybe it's just the he maybe would benefit from having.
Sorry, I was going to say, I do think it affected him, the Atletico Madrid thing. I do think that affected him. He's an incredible deep thinker.
Yeah, and from what I've heard, he's quite mature. He doesn't have any ambition to leave Celtic to go to a mid to bottom half English Premiership team. It is that Atletico Madrid level.
He should. Somewhere
in Germany, Spain, Portugal, top half of that league is where he aspires to go. And that he doesn't want to leave Celtic to go to, what's the point in going to a team, what's the point in going to Nottingham Forest, Everton, a team like that. I understand he's no interest in that type of move.
Yeah. Because he said to us, it was the start of the year, he says, sometimes when I think it was before the first game of the season, or was it, there was some maybe it was the last season or something, there was 7 or 8 sellouts in the Spin at Celtic Park. Mm-hmm. And I asked him about it. And he was saying, do you know, we might never, all our Celtic players that are here right now, we can move on to clubs for more money, we can move on to clubs, and he didn't quite say bigger leagues and all that because he's quite respectful, but he said you can move on and see a different environment and all that. He says, but you might never experience this again. What you experience at Celtic Park when you turn out in front of a 60,000 sellout, he says, these will be the biggest occasions. Even if people move on and do well and really further their careers, they might not have that kind of occasion to come to every second week. He says, so you have to, you really have to embrace it and appreciate it. And it was he's that kind of level of philosophical kind of interrogation of his, his professionalism or whatever, or his profession is pretty rare for a guy so young.
Yeah. I mean, we just talked about players being at 22, 23, being young people. And, he always comes across as very mature, considering he is also that sort of age, that sort of 22, 23.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the Celtic goals. So now I very, very, very rarely lose my rag at a game. Players don't intentionally make mistakes, is my sort of attitude. And invariably, if there's a player who I don't believe is good enough for Celtic, I try to take the attitude of it's not his fault that he's playing first team football for Celtic and not good enough. He's doing the best he can. And getting on a player's back doesn't enhance that player's performance. That's generally my attitude going to games. But anybody who's sitting around me at Hampden will know I lost my rag on Saturday for the 2 Aberdeen goals because they were replications of each other.
I know.
Of 2 players in our team on the left-hand side of the defence who couldn't do the simple thing of judging the flight of a ball and following a guy. I mean, you lose the track. You know you're going to be under the ball. So what you do is you then turn your body position to defend that, or you keep going, or you make sure that you keep an eye on the only Aberdeen player who's there, and so that if you're not going to get the ball, you just make sure that he's not going to get the ball. And our 2 defenders did neither.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts on the goals?
That was, I think as the season's gone on, and I hate to say it, 'cause he's such a great guy and he's had such a great season, but not quite good enough, the vibes that you have your great 6 months. You can have a great 6 months, but it's really sustaining it. And I think in the last month or so, I think what we're seeing is the limitations of Liam Scales, who has been terrific, until the last couple of months or whatever, but within those last couple of months, it demonstrates the need for Celtic to have better quality in that position. I mean, I don't think there's any way around that. There's no other way of dressing that up. And
people can people can overperform for a brief period, but they always revert to the mean. They revert to the standard that they are.
Yeah, I remember.
And this is a guy who was 6th or 7th choice centre half for Celtic last season.
I know. I remember my early days at Celtic. Mike Galloway had this incredible 6 months. Incredible 6 months. He got in the Scotland squad and everything, and we said, oh, you're having a purple patch, and he hated the phrase, right? You're having a purple, and I remember us doing the headline, this is no purple patch. We're writing it and we're putting it in and saying, this is a purple patch, this isn't you. And it was never him again. It was never him again. When you think about it, there's been...
I mean, a player can, if you look at someone like, say, Paul Lambert, right? Now, patently, when Paul Lambert went to Dortmund, obviously, he just got it. He just got what his role in football was. He understood what he did, and it transformed him from a player that was at Motherwell and St Mirren, that if we'd have signed him from Motherwell or St Mirren, everyone would have been, what are we doing, wasting our money on that? But he just obviously was able to assess, this is my game. If I do this and play my game this way, I can be an elite player, right? So occasionally there will be that player who St Paul on the road to Damascus moment, it just hits them. They work out at a later stage in life, this is how I need to play to play at the top level. Don't ever try anything other than this style of passing, this, just keep it in that box. Yeah. But that's the exception. The majority are Dan Jackson and Mike Galloway and players who have a purple patch.
I know. Although, like the other one, which Celtic didn't benefit for because they couldn't inspire that growth within him. And then you think about what he was doing at 32, 33 was Tommy Coyne. A guy who just kept getting better throughout his career. I mean, when Tommy Coyne was at Celtic, he used to say it was all the kind of, his third touch is a tackle type stuff and all that, And then you saw him leading the line for the Republic in the 94 World Cup, and he was incredible. And he was a guy who just kept built his career. He maximised his attributes. But as you say, it doesn't happen often. But I mean, Paul Lambert, I remember when he was desperate to come to Celtic and Murdo was pushing to get him signed at the 97-98 season, or the ending 10 years without a title, or the 10 busting season, or whatever way you want to describe it. And it was like, we're talking to Jock about it, and Jock says, I've spoken to Craig, I've spoken to my brother, but we can do better for 2.2 million than Paul Lambert. They didn't want to sign him. That's why he didn't arrive until the November, if you remember.
Uh-huh.
It had been bubbling along for 6 weeks before that. And it was just humming and hawing. And then, within a month, or 2 months, he was scoring the goal that helped win the New Year kind of derby, and Celtic were on their way.
Yeah. So, I think what we're saying is Scale's not going to be that late bloomer and become the established Celtic centre half.
The third or fourth centre half at Celtic, when you're going to get plenty of games as well, like you a serviceable third or fourth. Well, when you see a Lager-Bielka and Narovski, the manager doesn't rate them, and they don't have what he demands. Pace and power. That's what he's always said about centre backs. There's a certain...
Well, on Lager-Bielka, he just doesn't think he's got the pace, and that's very difficult to change. You might be able to make marginal changes if you send someone to a sprint coach, but that's about it.
No.
On Narovski, I think the issue seems to be his general fitness and robustness and strength. But interestingly, there's someone I know who their nephew plays in the top flight in Polish football, and they'd said when we signed Narovski, He's a really good player. He will turn out to be a great player for Celtic. But the Polish League's nowhere near the physicality of the Scottish League or European football that Celtic will be playing in. And he will take a year to get up to speed in terms of his physicality and fitness.
Well, maybe he's, When you think about it, Celtic spent $4 million, paid $4 million for him.
Yeah.
It wasn't one of their 2 million jobs. It's like, large sections of the support tear their hair out.
No, it was 4 million. So you got to hope that Brendan will, a year at Celtic, that next season he'll kick on. And I'm being a bit facetious about the 3 and the 0, but my personal perspective is the standard of player that Celtic need to have to be able to remain the dominant side in Scottish football and to at least compete, particularly in the new format of the Champions League, where we'll have an extra couple of games. And I want, we want us to do better than losing to everybody bar one and
the dead rubber.
The group we want to be competitive, even in the games when we're losing to the elite sides. We want to feel as though there was a period of, like when in Ange's season where for 60 minutes at Celtic Park against Real Madrid, we were the better team. You're wanting to get a feeling that we can compete for it.
They did that this season. They did that this season against Atletico.
I know.
Lazio.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to say, if we want to be that team, for me, someone like Liam Scales, a player of that standard, isn't getting near our bench. That's my
in an ideal world, you would be pitching.
But at the game, it was Scales that I mainly lost the rag with. But watching it back on iPlayer, Greg Taylor as well. I don't know what he's doing. I mean, as the ball's about to be played in, the Aberdeen player is behind Taylor.
Yeah.
At the edge of the 18-yard box. And by the time they've run 12 yards to the 6-yard box, the guy's 2 yards in front of Greg Taylor.
Yeah. I mean, they were kind of drawn towards the ball, and yet they weren't drawn towards the ball, because then the ball, they don't make contact with the ball. There's no first contact, second contact. It seems really weird that once it happened once, fool me once, fool me twice,
And well, the thing about it is, and interestingly, so St Anthony from our side had wanted Brendan to break the rules and make an additional substitution at Ibrox with a defender, which would have obviously given Rangers the 3-0 victory if we'd managed to do it. But he wanted it, when it got to 3-2, he wanted Brendan to bring on another defender. He'd used up his substitute, so it wasn't possible. But the thing is, against Aberdeen, that's exactly what he did. He took James Forrest off, and that's one of those ones where, when you're that close to the end of the game and you're so concerned that you take off your substitute, Forrest, and bring on another defender, as he did.
I know, I thought it sent out all the wrong signals. I thought it sent, and I don't want to say that because he's in the past, great substitution, but also, actually, because I'm watching it again and I thought, am I really seeing that? And I went back and watched Aberdeen's goal to make it 3-3. And I thought, right, he's brought in the extra defender, so he's essentially got your three-man central defence. Therefore, what that I thought would allow Johnston was to go out and clamp himself onto the guy that was he stopped the cross, because you don't have to worry about that someone's coming inside you, or there might be somebody bolted through, and there's going to be a space between you and your right centre back. Johnston didn't get close to stopping the cross. He actually, I know you're saying it's the two left-sided guys. It was a calamity involving the entire back four. Because why was Johnson not stopping the cross when he knew he had Narovsky? Back five.
Yeah, and so that's where I would sometimes, so the managers looked at it, and I need to go back to Aberdeen's second at the equaliser at the end of the full 90 minutes in a minute, because you just reminded me about something about the managers looked at it and thought, we've got 2 minutes to hold out here. And the defence is looking all over the place. I'm just going to stick an extra defender on, and all I need him to do is clear it. Now, two things happened. Then what happens is they don't, everything, Aberdeen's third goal then happens just moments after that. So that those players haven't got an opportunity to fit it in. Haven't set. And then the second thing is that just shows that sometimes it's individual decision making. So you're right. Alistair Johnston hasn't changed his mindset of there's an extra centre half to give me cover here so I can push out to this and defend the cross.
Yeah.
He hasn't. So that's not the substitution issue. That's a player mindset and individual decision making in the game fault of a player. And then because we've got that extra centre half, the fact that the furthest back of the three centre halves.
Yeah.
Still,
he's too tight.
He's too tight and doesn't think, right, well, we've now got three centre halves, so I can push back a wee bit here. He's too tight on Carter, so that actually when you watch it back, there's Johnson not pressing down on the attacker, and then there's like virtually no space between Carter, Vickers and Scales, because Scales is right behind Carter Vickers and completely misjudges the ball and not thinking to himself, I've got a bit of breathing space here, so I'm going to take a step back here and be a wee bit off Carter Vickers. So to some extent that was all individual decision making errors from the players for me. And getting back to individual decision making errors, the other player that there was two people I was going ballistic at Aberdeen's equaliser for the second goal, Scales again, and Lewis Palmer. We are a minute to go in 90 minutes in a game where it's the ball breaks to him. Just grab the ball, take control, waste 10 seconds. And at that stage of the game, 10 seconds is an eternity for Aberdeen. Just take 10 seconds, take control of the ball, let Celtic get back into formation, and then pass it out. Instead, he tries the Hollywood through ball.
Yeah. See if it had gone through, mind you. See if it had gone through. It was game over because he was very close to, but it was the wrong book because my sister's shouting. She's going, just retain possession, just keep a hold of the ball. She just kept shouting, keep a hold of the ball. Because Celtic tried
we got a corner, and I can't remember whether it was the end of the 90 minutes or the end of towards the end of extra time. I can't remember, it was before Aberdeen.
I think it was towards the end of extra time.
Yeah. And my brother and I turned to each other as we were doing it and said, none of them are Samaras. And my nephew said, was Samaras good at a corner? And we were like, if we got a corner and Samaras was on the pitch, he'd still have the ball when Hearts and Rangers kicked off tomorrow.
Do you remember the run-in when Celtic had to win those 7 games when Rangers were in the Europa League final at Celtic?
When they got the season extended?
When they dug out a 2-1 win at Motherwell. I'm pretty sure there was a classic Samaras ball in the corner, like when it went for about 10 minutes. It felt like that, but it was just make sure you win that game, and they just made sure they won that game. They just kept living on their backs.
Samaras was brilliant for taking a corner, then the opposition come down, and brilliant for just knocking it off one of those guys and getting the corner again or getting an arse. I remember once at Ibrox.
Getting it done, and then he would fall.
I mean, that was one of my favourite things about Samaras as an outball in European football. If we'd just had 5 minutes of pressure, long diagonal ball to Samaras would run into a position where he got fouled because he was intelligent enough to know if he just gets it and runs, it's a waste of time. He needs to play to stop us to calm down, get back into formation. And again, Palmer's position, ball goes to Samaras. Samaras would have got a foul there. Because that wastes 30 seconds. You get in the foul there. Samaras would have taken that in, held it, waited for got his body, as he would have seen an Aberdeen player coming in, and I know there are lots of people in here used to get really, or listen to this, used to get really frustrated for Samaras, and we used to vote him player of the year all the time. Samaras would just he would have seen the Aberdeen player coming, got his body between the ball and the player, got the foul. Aberdeen would have then had to take their whole team back into their half. we could have set up information. It would have been, instead, Palmer tries the Hollywood pass. And your point was, if it had gone through.
I know. But
your only issue the only time you play that is if there's a minute to go and we're losing by a goal.
Yeah, you're right. It's funny now, bigger teams never used to do it. It was almost like showing a sign of weakness to do this. And when I watched, was it Real Madrid I watched doing it? And I thought, God, even it, it's one of these things that people do now, the short corner just to kill time. But the biggest clubs didn't used to do that because they thought, we're better than that.
Yeah.
We don't need to be reduced to this, like time, because effectively it is time wasting. And I think in the last 2 weeks, some of the games I've watched Man City and Real Madrid doing it, and it's like, it's kind of shocking to me that it's everyone will do it now. Because there used to be a kind of slight sneering, it's not in the spirit of the game. Initially, when people started to do it, this kind of time wasting, but it's just part of the game now, isn't it? It's how the game.
But I think, and that's actually an extension. We were when the guys on here we were in a WhatsApp group and we were just talking about some of the small incremental changes to football that you don't realise have had a wider impact on the game. And sometimes it's things like the balls being a wee bit different, the pitches all being immaculate, the players were better. So if you think about it, at the business end of the season, as they like to say, the pitches used to be horrific. So actually you had to keep playing because you didn't want to risk getting caught in possession because the pitch was horrific. So there's an element of those elite teams are now playing on bowling greens that are in such fantastic condition, their ability. So then if you've got technically better players, there is not an external event such as a divot in the pitch or whatever that could impact. They are now wholly reliant upon their own ability to control the ball and control possession, and therefore doing that professional thing of just seeing out possession because you can control the ball and retain possession, and you're comfortable that you can do that. And I suppose referees also being stronger on fouls mean that getting back to my Samaras thing, those players are also more intelligent about. If somebody's getting too close to me when I'm holding on to this ball, I can just move.
They're better protected.
They will make some form of contact. Yeah, they'll make some contact with me that I can get the foul out of this. So there's all of these incremental changes that do it. So if we move on to the penalties.
Whoa.
The ironic thing is, for much of my life, I have never had confidence that we are always putting a penalty in the back of the net, yet I had flashbacks on Saturday to the Spartak Moscow penalty shootout when Strachan was manager and we qualified for the Champions League, when every one of our penalties was brilliant in that game. I mean, in that game, every one of our penalties, laces went through the ball and they were top corner of it.
And Boric did his heroics as well, didn't he?
Didn't know what to do, so there's a odd dance, but our penalties were all good, and I wouldn't criticise Joe Hart.
No. And it's like, we a couple of months ago, Hart was telling us, he says, I'm desperate to take a penalty. And it was like, I mean, some of the commentary around, what are you giving your keeper a fifth penalty? I didn't quite understand it. And then they would say, well, I know Ederson took one for Real Madrid the other night. Right. So if your objection is to a keeper taking a penalty, what do you mean you know Ederson? Ederson's a keeper. So if you either got something against keepers or you've just decided, you've never seen Joe Hart taking a penalty, but you've decided that Joe Hart shouldn't take a penalty. It was a good penalty as well. It was just...
I always think someone who hits the post with a penalty, particularly if it's not the outside the post, someone who hits a penalty was 1 centimetre away from the perfect penalty. Because if you'd just been 1 centimetre, if you'd been 1 centimetre further to the right, that's an impossible penalty to save. Because from the middle of the goal, the keeper's it's not capable for the keeper to get down to that point.
No.
And save the ball. So you're only 1 centimetre away from it.
I've seen it described as a terrible, after his terrible penalty, he redeemed himself. Tell you, I must admit.
In fact,
see the Aberdeen penalty, he thought, if you watch that back, Joe Hart saying, where the hell is it? He thinks it's bounced off the inside of the post and gone behind him. He thinks it's in. It's so funny when you see his...
I thought it was going in. I thought it hit the post. I thought it was doing that thing in post opposite corner. That's what I thought was happening at the game. And then suddenly...
Joe Hart thinks that.
Suddenly it's... And then it's going beyond the line of the other post, and I suddenly realise it's not going in.
What a character, but like he not only just because he took a penalty, then he saved the penalty, but like see even his expressions and all that. Obviously, he knows he's not got many more occasions like this, and he was a guy that he just loves it. It's just you could just tell he was soaking it all up. That's what I think. That's what I miss a wee bit about football. And I remember saying to Callum McGregor, but actually I haven't seen it so much from him recently. He used to smile a lot on the pitch. I mean, you say to him, it's great to see you smile on the pitch. He says, I'm just doing something I love. But since he's become the captain, you very rarely seen him smiling on the pitch. But you could see Joe Hart, even between the penalties and all that, he was because he's thinking to himself, as he said later on in his Instagram or whatever, it was carnage. He's thinking, this is crazy. This is just feels crazy.
But the thing about it that one in Hearts got a terrible record as a keeper at saving penalties, right? If you look back through his career.
He tells us he had a great record because he saved penalties. Was it a Champions League semi-final and all that? He said until I come up here, I had a great record saving penalties. And I think I looked up because I thought like you, and he did have a much better record. And then he came to Celtic. He says, I haven't done this.
One of the things I thought in his first season and a half, he was trying too much waving about and crouching down. And I thought, no, you're Joe Hart, one of the most capped goalkeepers for England, up against a crappy Scottish Premier League player. You need to behave like you are 10 feet tall and remind the guy that he's up against Joe Hart. And if you start doing all the crouching down and all the dancing around, you're portraying that you don't have confidence. If you go up there with a swagger and stand still and be big and brash, you're searing into that guy's brain, I'm up against Joe Hart, former England goalkeeper. And I felt, actually in this season at penalties, he's been more what I think he should be, which is, I'm Joe Hart and I'm big. And I really felt he helped with that. He hits the penalty and it hits the post. Yeah. And his whole demeanour after, he's smiling and winking at people. His whole demeanour after that was, look, I think that was it's fine. Because do you know what? I'll save one of your penalties. I'm not like a penalty kick taker's got one crack at this. I missed a penalty, but I'm now going to save one of your penalties.
It was actually, the whole demeanour he gave off. Tangible. There's a tangible sense of that thing. Like, it's going to be okay. His whole kind of mien or whatever was, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. Whether he was just trying to kind of exude that, you know, and it was a gamesmanship or whatever, but it did create the whole kind of, it gave off the right vibe. Because it's like, I mean, that's the fourth time seeing Celtic, you know, a penalty shootout in the Scottish Cup, and that's the first time you really thought that they were going to win one. Because even all during that Hearts one in the fanless season, okay, you always thought they weren't going to win that for something, you know, when you think back, that was a crazy shootout as well. In 1990, I remember,
it was, and that was another crazy game where we let Hearts into that game. We were like, it was an easy game, and then we let Hearts in.
It's the only time a team's ever come back from 2-0 down to get back on terms in a Scottish Cup final.
But if you look all over, not just football, if you look all over Europe, teams succeeded in that fanless season who haven't succeeded before and haven't succeeded since. It was a weird season. In fact, if you look in all sports, teams did it. There was exceptional teams in all sports and freakish results. You know, you look at our league and there's a team who can't win a league. who bottle it every season, who managed to not do it because there was no fans.
You look at Liverpool, who might be bottling it this season, but Liverpool lost 6 consecutive home games that season. For the first time since I think it was 1958. Yeah. Imagine losing 6 consecutive home games at Anfield. Liverpool. We'd never seen it in our lifetime.
Yeah, so it's an
anomaly.
It was a freak season.
More asterisks. We're running out of asterisks for the Scottish League titles.
Yes. So the one of the things that's really good for me is Joe Hart's last ever professional football game.
Wow, I know.
Is going to be the Scottish Cup final.
Yeah, I know.
So he could go up the steps and his final season could be lifting the Scottish Cup in a double winning season. So that could be quite fitting for a guy who, before he came to Celtic, wasn't necessarily a fan of.
Me neither. He's one of the biggest surprises of my 35 years, interviewing footballers, is getting taken to spend time in Joe Hart's company, and he's just not the guy I thought he was, in the best possible way. He's just such a warm, he treats you on the level, he's great with his time, he thinks about what he says, it's not just the kind of normal flannel. He gives you lines of go-go, and he just, you can tell he's a guy who just loves football, and loves that he's had this late period kind of experience. Because when you think about where his career was going, sitting on the bench for Spurs or whatever.
Well, so he might not want to go back to the bench, but somebody made the point to me that would he not be particularly when you see him at that penalty shootout, would he not be exactly the type of person that we should try and retain? We say, look, we are going to be signing we're going to be spending whatever it is, £5 million, £6 million on a keeper in the summer. But you know, I think if we could get Bain out the door and, God, can't even remember the keeper with something, didn't really get his name. Siegrist out the door. That having the new first team, having a really experienced Joe Hart on the bench, and then, you know, if we get one of the younger keepers coming through as our third choice, you know, somebody was saying, someone I know was suggesting that it would be great if we could try and persuade Joe to stay in that experienced voice around the dressing room principle. I'm just not sure if he could be bothered being a sub for a season.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a different story. I saw at the weekend there was some suggestion that he'd been offered a role that wasn't a coaching one. I mean, what other kind of role can he? He's going to be one of these guys that kind of presses the flesh, you know, at the lounges or something. I mean, what's the...
An ambassador. A goalkeeping ambassador for the club.
If he starts up a podcast, we're in trouble because he's brilliant. He's so lucid, and he's got all these mad stories and all that he just offers up. You know, we got him in that COVID season. Obviously, we were doing all the interviews over the phone, and so it was like a different journalist was picked every week to interview the player and then disseminate the quotes. So I got Joe Hart in the day, it was exactly 19 years since he'd first, his senior debut as a 16-year-old. And I happened to tell him, it was David Friel of The Sun had spotted this. And he went, I've never heard a guy so happy at a journalist's question. He went, "Oh, I love that. Oh, I love that. Where'd you get that? Oh, that's amazing. Oh, I'm so chuffed. You've made me so happy." I mean, this is because I transcribed it exactly how he said it. It's like, wow. He said, and he told the whole story about how he had to get out of school early and how he was even tall then and all this and he wasn't expecting it. And it was just brilliant. It's just brilliant when you get someone who's so engaging and so happy to engage. Doesn't he treat you like that off their shoe, you know?
Yeah.
It's so...
Well, we'll maybe need to get him on once he's retired or got this special role, whatever it is.
Definitely. Definitely. Must be 20 years now, I suppose. That'll be him, 20 years.
Anyway.
He's first.
Aye. So, we've covered the cup final. I was going to talk about VAR, but that's an hour, and I was trying to keep it because obviously the last one you and I did, this one will go out before it. So the last one was an hour and a half long. So I might even cut that one in, that people will be listening to this haven't heard that one yet. So if you're listening out of order, I might even cut that into 2 podcasts. It was so good, the Fergus years one. So this will go out and then it'll be the other one. Anyway, people listening to this will have no idea what I'm talking about.
Like a episode, you know.
I wanted to
keep tapas back there.
Exactly. So I wanted to keep this to about an hour. So with that, Andrew Smith, thanks very much.
Bring me sunshine in your smile.
I hope you enjoyed that podcast. There will be more along soon, and there will definitely be more from Andrew coming soon. We've got some exciting news here at CelticUnderground.net, so keep your eyes peeled on our social media. I will say no more, but if you go onto our website, CelticUnderground.net, at the start of May, you might hear some exciting news about forthcoming explosion of content that we're going to be having here, with some quality writing for once, and listening. Anyway, enough of me. That was me, Harry Brady, with him, Andrew H. Smith, and this is me, Harry Brady, saying good night and God bless. Good night.
Bring me sunshine in your smile. Bring me laughter all the while. In this world where we live, there should be more happiness. So much joy you can give to each brand new bright tomorrow. Make me happy through the years. Never bring me any tears. Let your arms be as warm as the sun from up above. Bring me fun, bring me sunshine, bring me love, sweet love. Bring me fun, bring me sunshine, bring